Hello, and welcome back to another Eduonics tutorial. In this section, we're going over photo correction in Photoshop, and in this video, we'll be covering Liquefy Adjustment. What is Liquefy Adjustment? Well, you're not converting your image into water or even working with liquid at all. When you liquefy a layer, you're making it moldable. Liquefy allows you to grab areas of your image and warp them around. So instead of erasing, coloring, and chopping, you're just pushing the pixels where you want them. I like this image because it has a lot of wavy hairs that I can bend and pull around. This will help you to see how the liquefy process works. To start off, I'm going to duplicate my current layer by hitting Ctrl-J on the keyboard. Now, to liquefy this layer, I'll go up to Filter, Liquefy. This has brought up a whole new window. In here, we have my image in the middle, which hasn't changed. It hasn't changed yet because I have to tell Liquefy what to do. The main tool to use is up here on the top left. It's called the Forward Warp tool, and I'll just make sure that I have it selected and brush it in the image. You can see that as I drag it around my image, it's essentially pushing or smudging these areas around. In fact, it does remind me of the smudge tool. The main difference between this and the smudge tool are all the new options I have at my disposal. If I check here on the right, there's some tool options. There's brush size, obviously controlling the size of the brush, and below it I have brush pressure, which controls the strength of the push the brush applies. And these options aren't limited to just the Forward Warp tool. In fact, most of these tools on the left operate with the same basic size and pressure options. Below the Forward Warp tool, I have something called the Reconstruct tool. As I drag it in my image, you can see it acts as sort of an undo eraser. I can use it to sort of push things back to the way they were. This is important because I don't have access to the history panel while I'm in the Liquefy window. If I want to undo all of my Liquefy, but I don't want to cancel out the whole window, I can just click this Restore All button over here on the bottom right, and it will revert my whole image back to its original state. To the left, below the Reconstruct tool, I have this thing called the Pucker tool. I'm going to go ahead and click and hold this on my image. What this is doing is it's shrinking everything inside the brush toward the very center. And you'll notice that it leaves the very edges of the brush intact. The longer I hold this in one place, the more it shrinks. Kind of looks like a black hole. Below the Pucker tool, we have its exact opposite, the Bloat tool. I'm going to go ahead and click and hold in one spot. Nothing happens. That's because this tool will only bloat things as long as you're moving the mouse. A lot of people find this tool difficult to control, but it's pretty simple. You just click and drag at a slow speed to make small changes, and click and drag at a faster speed to make big changes. Finally, below the Bloat tool, we have a tricky one, the Push Left tool. Basically, this one works exactly like the Forward Warp tool, only it redirects everything to the left of whatever direction we're moving. So, if I drag up, it will push left. If I drag down, it will push right. If I drag left, it will push down. And if I drag right, it will push up. Like I said, it's a little tricky, but it makes it so that instead of dragging many lines with the Forward Warp tool, You can just drag one line with the Push Left tool. But the Liquefy filter doesn't end there. You may have noticed here in the options, there's an unchecked box called Advanced Mode. I'm going to go ahead and check this. Wow, this really is Advanced Mode. The first thing I notice here in the tool options are these brush density and brush rate sliders. So far, we know that brush pressure controls the strength of the brush, how hard we're pulling the pixels from their original position. Brush density basically controls how thick the bristles of our brush are. Let me show you what I mean. I'll make sure that I have my forward warp tool selected, and I'll make sure that my brush size is at 100, my density is at 0, and my pressure is at 100. Then I'll just click and drag in my canvas. Okay, so this brush is making a thin but strong warp, meaning that it's moving a few pixels a long way. I'm going to go ahead and increase my density up to 100 and try again. So now my brush is making a much thicker warp that's just as strong. So it's moving a lot of pixels a long way. Brush rate is a little bit different. It mostly controls other liquefy tools, like the pucker and bloat tools. Remember when I was using the pucker tool to just click and hold in one spot to make that black hole looking thing? I'm going to do that again, with the brush rate at different values. First, I'll get my pucker tool and keep the brush rate at 100. Then I'll just click and hold in one spot. You can see that it very quickly accelerates, shrinking everything towards the middle. Now I'll go up and decrease the brush rate to around 25. And try clicking and holding in one spot again. You can see that it's doing the same thing, but much slower. It's sort of going in stages, instead of shrinking everything all at once. Now that we have the Advanced section open, there's some new options in our Tools panel. This one, above the Pucker tool, is called the Twirl Clockwise tool, and it's another tool that is affected by brush rate. That is to say that it will spin faster at 100 brush rate than it will at 25. If I bring my brush rate back up to 100 and click and hold in my image, it will make a spiral going clockwise. If I want to make the spiral go counterclockwise, I can just press and hold the Alt key, and it will spin in the opposite direction. Another tool I have above the Twirl tool is called the Smooth tool. Now the Smooth tool is a little unique. It functions a little like the Reconstruct tool, but it doesn't go as far as to completely undo your changes like the Reconstruct tool will do. To demonstrate what I mean, I'll get my Reconstruct tool and apply it to the spiral on the right. You can see how it very quickly just vanishes my spiral as I drag over it. Now I'll get the Smooth tool and try the same thing on the other spiral. You can see that it not so much erases my spiral as it tries to sort of make more sense of the spiral, pushing things in an area where they make more sense, but not necessarily undoing the warp. Eventually, I'll get to a point where the tool doesn't really seem to be making much of a difference anymore, which should mean that my image is back to normal. But if I go over here and click the Restore All button, you can see that there would have been a lot more to go to make my image normal again. Another tool we have near the bottom here is called the Freeze Mask tool. This is very useful. Let's say that I want to move all this fur around, but I don't want to affect this lady's face. Well, I could go around very carefully and painstakingly brush all the fur while trying to avoid the face. Maybe I could use the reconstruct tool here or there if I make any mistakes. Or I could use the freeze mask tool to protect her face before I do any warping at all. All I have to do is use the freeze mask to paint in the areas I want to freeze or protect. Then I'll go here near the bottom right and uncheck Show Mask. Now I'll get my swirl tool and just go crazy with it. You can see that even though the swirl tool is making some massive changes all over this image, the face remains exactly where it is. There's one more option I want to show you. You see these areas where I twirled near the edges? I made these sort of holes because I brought these areas of the image too far in. Fortunately, there's an option below the brush rate on the right called Pin Edges. I'll just check that, and boom, my edges are fixed. This sort of stretches my image to fill the gaps. Very cool. Okay. That will do it for the Liquefy filter. I'll go over some more photo correction techniques in the next video.